This program is brought to you by Globus.
Its regional cooperation, a competitive age for protecting Africa's natural resources. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another edition of your discursive and informative as well knowledge sharing program. It is Global Insight. Today, we want to look at the advantages that regional cooperation presents to the African continent, in line with resource protection for the betterment of the African continent. We can see, according to reports from copper and cobalt deposits of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia within the SADC region, to gold, oil and uranium resources of the Sahel. The continent Africa possesses the mineral and energy assets driving global economy, yet fragmented policies, weak border controls, limited infrastructure and the export of raw materials continue to reduce the continent's bargaining power. Regional blocs, however, are now seeking a different approach. SADC is promoting shared corridors, mineral processing and industrial value chains. The Alliance of Sahel States exploring sovereign cooperation in security, transport and resource management across Africa. The African Union and the African Continental Free Trade Area offer a broader framework for harmonizing regulations, expanding markets and strengthening the continent's negotiation position. However, but can cooperation protect resources without weakening national sovereignty? And of course, what are the stakes or parameters that present themselves in line with regional cooperation, Africa's integration and resource protection at this juncture of where the global transition is actually opening a gap in Africa, where you see bodies of superpowers carving spheres of influence, particularly in line with the quest for mineral resources. So, ladies and gentlemen, our panel today seeks to uncover if the regional cooperation will provide a competitive edge or a better scope to protect Africa's resources at every level, and of course use these resources to spur development and to meet Agenda 2030-2063 as articulated by regional bodies including SADC, the Sahel region. We have ECOWAS, and of course Africa's #1 institution, the African Union. How can they move from just theoretical talks to a more practical dispensation that will actually carve a different platform or niche for resource protection in Africa and for the benefits of the African population? You are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just to note that we will go together to also highlight some of these points which were reiterated during the 46th Extraordinary Summit of SADC leaders and head of state who met in Durban, South Africa, and majority of them talked about the need not to export more of mineral resources, but rather see how these resources can be actually harnessed back home, and also see how engagement with investors will ensure a more fertile ground for job creation across Africa to somehow bring some solutions to the myriad of problems affecting the rich continent. So I will join you right after the jingle to introduce the panel as we continue to seek to understand better the importance of regional cooperation and resource protection in Africa at this juncture. Welcome back if you are just joining us. This is Global Insight on your Pan-African television brought to you by Globers, and we continue to talk what is very important, a very rich continent, yet its population is still somehow in dire need of things that can actually or are already available on the continent. So today we are looking at how regional cooperation can help to protect Africa's resources and of course drive new dispensations in order to spur development, especially under its flagship Agenda 2063. Without much ado, let's go straight away to the United States of America. We're being joined by Dr. ACHILLE, who is a banker, CEO Washington Valuation Group, and of course corporate finance expert. It's a pleasure to have you again on this platform after a long time. Dr. EKEU, as we continue to talk what is imperative for the continent Africa in the times of global transition.
Well, thank you so much, Clarisse, for this invitation. I'm sorry I was I was a little busy recently for the past few weeks. Really very busy. I've never had I barely breathed, and so I am back, and I'm glad to be part of this panel today for this topic discussion. And before I talk about it, I wanted to share my condolences to the family of our director of television the director of television of this channel, Pan African Media, who passed away recently, and so I wanted to share my condolences to her family and to all of you, her colleagues, and to the whole Pan-African media, or to the whole Pan-Africanist around the world that she has been working with, talking to, interacting with, on a daily basis. So it's a very sad event, but nonetheless, it's a trajectory we're all going to take one way or another at one point or another. So I just want to make sure that I address this point before I start delving into this conversation.
Okay,
so I'm glad to be part of this panel, and hopefully we are going to share our views here and go deeper into this conversation, because it's a very technical issue. It's very important for the people that are listening to us to understand the ins and outs of this topic, and I'm glad to be here to give my point of view. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, thank you so much, and I also thank you for sympathizing with us at this moment of grief. One of us is no longer with us, and it's actually a sad moment for the Pan-African media and also the Pan-African journalists across the continent. Of course, we go now to India to also acknowledge the presence of SHARMA, who is an international relations expert, assistant professor of political sciences, and who actually has a keen understanding of the events across the African continent. Thank you for giving us importance this day to talk this very topical question of resource protection and how regional cooperation can serve as a competitive edge for the continent Africa. Welcome.
Thank you, Clarisse. Always a pleasure to be joined by the panelists and to be here with you. First of all, I would also like to extend my condolence for the loss. We all feel this, and I believe that you do not need to be an African to be a Pan-Africanist. We all share the idea. We all are part of the same journey, and I feel very sorry for the loss, and we hope that the team and the group will have the support and will get to move away from this without disrupting or forgetting the legacy that has been created by the director. So I look forward to today's discussion, and it's a very timely and very relevant topic. So I look forward to contribute my points and my opinions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear SHARMA, for accepting our invitation, ladies and gentlemen. Before we go into getting the viewpoint of our esteemed guests, it is imperative that we get an excerpt from the South African president who recently spoke at the 46th Extraordinary Summit of SADC leaders, and also highlighting the need to, and I will quote, "We must process more of what we mine and add value to more of what we grow and manufacture, more of what we consume." And of course, the quotes from Ramaphosa, among other things that he highlighted during a meeting with his other peers and also heads of government in Durban, South Africa. We'll listen to this excerpt and then we'll join you thereafter for more understanding and analysis on our topic, which is very relevant at this juncture. Thank you.
Summit must therefore accelerate through the decisions that we will take. The implementation of the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan of 2020 to 2030. First, we must deepen industrialization and build regional value chains. The minerals and agricultural commodities of our region must become the foundation of Southern African manufacturing. We must process more of what we mine and add value to more of what we grow and manufacture more of what we consume. Secondly, we must invest boldly in regional infrastructure. We do need the roads that should link our countries. We need the efficient railways that should carry the minerals and manufactured goods, and modern ports that should connect Southern Africa to continental and global markets. Our infrastructure must connect not only our capitals and commercial centers, but also rural communities, our border towns and unserviced regions, underserviced rural areas that have remained on the margins of development. And thirdly, we must strengthen our energy, water, and digital security. We should also expand electricity generation and transmission capacity and deepen cooperation through the existing Southern African power pool and strengthen it. Every citizen must have access to safe water and adequate sanitation. We must therefore invest in cross-border water infrastructure to secure water for our households, our farms, and industries. We must expand affordable digital connectivity so that every community, every entrepreneur, and every young person can participate fully in the digital economy. And fourthly, we must build climate-resilient food systems. And we must also be able to respond to climate diversity, as well as agricultural expertise to feed our people and become major global producers of food. We must improve agricultural productivity, strengthen regional food reserves and agricultural value chains, and support smallholder and emerging farmers. And fifthly, we must make full use of the opportunities that are presented by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In the end, SADC must become a powerful platform from which our businesses can access a continental market of more than 1.4 billion people that reside on our continent. But this will require us to remove non-tariff barriers, improve border management, harmonize standards, and make it easier for goods, services, capital, and skills to move out. They must be properly costed. They must be funded, assigned, and monitored. Our communiques must become construction sites, factories, power lines, water systems, laboratories, businesses, and create jobs for our young people. Regional integration must be seen and felt in the daily lives of our people. Now, in the end, none of this will be possible without peace, security, and stability. Peace without development is fragile. Development without peace is impossible. We must continue to invest in preventative diplomacy, mediation, and political dialogues to solve political challenges and problems.
And that was the President of South Africa, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, sharing some thoughts in line with the just concluded 46th Extraordinary Summit of SADC leaders. Of course, it brings us now to our topic for discussion, seeking to contextualize it. And I'll start off with you, Dr. ACHILLE with the conceptual understanding of a topic, which is asking the question if regional ties or cooperation presents a competitive edge to ensure resource protection at every level that will enhance, of course, the development across the African continent.
To reject the false choice between integration and resource protection. As Pan-Africanists, we should be clear. Regional ties are the strongest form of resource protection. For too long, Africa's minerals, oil, forests, land, and agricultural wealth have been extracted through arrangements and leave African nations with limited revenue, few jobs, weak technology transfer, and little industrial capacity. A country may own the mine, but if the refining, manufacturing, financing, shipping, and final sale happen elsewhere, it does not own the full value of its resources. So protecting Africa's resources cannot mean simply locking them underground or banning export without a plan. It must mean protecting the value they create. That requires African processing plants, African engineers, African-owned supply chains, African infrastructure, and African markets for African-made goods. No country can accomplish all of that alone. Lithium may be mined in one African state, refined where energy is abundant in another, combined with copper or cobalt from elsewhere, manufactured into components in a regional industrial hub, and sold throughout the continental market. That is not a loss of national sovereignty. It is sovereignty strengthened by African cooperation. The real danger is not regionalism. The real danger is African countries competing against one another for foreign capital by offering lower royalties, tax exemptions, weak local content rules, and unrestricted access to strategic minerals. When we negotiate separately, external powers set the terms. When we coordinate, Africa gains leverage. AfCFTA must therefore be more than a framework for moving goods across borders. It must become a framework for keeping value in Africa. It should support common standards on strategic minerals, fair taxation, local beneficiations, environmental safeguards, technology transfer, and transparent contracts. Africa's future cannot rest on exporting raw materials while importing expensive finished products. That model preserves dependency under the language of trade. The Pan-African answer is coordinated resource sovereignty, national ownership of resources, regional value chains, and the continental bargaining power. Africa does not need to choose between protecting its wealth and building stronger ties. It must use stronger ties to protect its wealth and turn that wealth into shared African prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. ACHILLE EKEU. It's indeed imperative to use its strengths to protect its resources for shared African prosperity. And in the same perspective, I come to you, SHARMA, to have an understanding of what we, mean by regional cooperation and resource protection, while giving some nitty-gritty to better understand the concept of VITA, to probably know why it is imperative to give importance to such, to be able to harness or see a total development that will actually affect positively the livelihood of local Africans.
Well, thank you for the question. I believe that the world we're living in the 21st century, it is not the world of 1960s or 1950s or 1850s. It is a globalized world, and you do need to have trade. You do need to have engage with the world to harness your own economy. And on that scale, I believe completely with Professor ACHILLE when he says that there is no question of, there is no option between regional cooperation and resource extraction. It has to be integrated. So there is no exact choice between that, whether you maintain regional ties or you proceed with resource protection. But the question largely, which I understand, is of sequencing. How are you going to do it? One way of doing it is that you have 54 countries, all of them doing it independently, small states, small bargaining chips. So they do have, almost all the African countries, most of them, they do have some resources. Some having cobalt, some having lithium, some having iron. And they can negotiate on their own terms and conditions. But would it make a prudent advice to do it independently? Would it not reduce all of them to be so small that their leverage in the negotiation is too low? But the other point is, can they do it without developing their own industrial base? Then would any integration, would any regional cooperation mean anything? I believe no. Even if you integrate yourself in a common market and your own regional, your own local India, your own national economy, national industrial base is not developed, any sort of cooperation, any sort of coordination is not going to work. The sequencing, which I believe should be followed, or what will work for Africa, is one of developing the national base, national industrial, investing in national capital, the capital intensive sectors by independent African states. And once that base is developed, then move towards a larger cooperation, be it in the form of SADC or be it in the form of the different regional architectures. And then only you could negotiate, you could leverage your collective importance, collective strength, and you do have the support of, you are substantiated by those important and developed local bases, and that would make your negotiation strategy much more profound and much more something that would give you the strength to choose your own terms. So I believe that is a strategy, and there is no option. With the point which you say that what's the edge? The edge is only because the edge is using your natural resources as a tool, as a leverage to fund the industrial base, and the continental integration would complement that integration, that development. Thank you.
While hoping that the other guests will join us subsequently, we continue with you, Dr. ACHILLE EKEU. You talked about value addition and other aspects, even highlighting sovereignty in your introductory statement. So let's try to understand how we can connect resource protection with a value addition in liner with, continental connection or cooperation at this juncture, given that recently we saw leaders trying to review the existing policies. We are talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are talking about Zimbabwe and other countries, including Namibia, that have decided to review the existing policies of trying not to, export more of raw materials. So let's try to see how, this cooperation connects with value addition, with some practical examples that will maybe demonstrate to what extent the trajectory for resource harmonization and even exploitation and transformation is ongoing across the Africa of today.
Well, that's a major question that you asked there. I mean, I think we just heard the President of South Africa, Mr. Ramaphosa, talking about the necessity to build the value chain in Africa, talking about investing in infrastructure, talking about creating industries to transform our raw products into finished products, so that we can benefit from transformation, from the add-on value, that it provides. And this is something that we cannot be continuing to just sell raw products or raw resources or minerals. And this is a model that we've inherited from colonization. And this is where I'm going to talk about another topic, which is political will. So political will in everything that we do on the continent, it comes from the political will. We've seen countries of the three Saharan countries, and we see how three presidents, although they are military people, but they have the political will to make their country better, and we see the changes happening every day. This is why all these foreign countries they don't like that. They don't like what Traore, like Mr. Chani in Niger, and President of Mali, what they're doing, because they are really putting Africa's interests, at the center of their policies. And that is not something that Western countries are used to. They don't like people who feel like they can, do things by themselves without the support or the help or the financing or the advice or anything from the West. That doesn't bode well with them. They don't know what is happening for in reality. And so it's making them unsettled, and so they don't know, especially with this situation that the U.S. is in, this quagmire. The U.S. I have to say that this quagmire situation with Iran that U.S. is in. Every day U.S. discovers that Iran has built so much power in terms of missiles and weapons that they never thought they had. Not only in the type of weapons that Iran has, but also the quantity of these weapons. They don't understand. They have and they don't want to deal with that kind of situation with Africa. So when they look at the silent countries, those are that's the typical leaders that Western countries don't like, because they are exerting their independence and they are doing things on their way and achieving the goal for their population. They're working for their population. So that is the same thing that is happening. That's not the same thing happening in the whole continent. And this is why we have disconnect policies between the different countries. Now, you just mentioned that Congo, Uganda, and other countries, they are reversing their policy with regard to the sale of their raw materials. This is weird. This is what I'm talking about. This is the pressure they're getting from Western countries put on those leaders. And because they're not leaders that are really there for their people, they don't have that Pan-Africanist vein. They don't have that mindset of fighting for your people. They're easy to corrupt. They're easy to convince. If I want to use that euphemism, they're easy to convince and to sell their resources raw as it is, and not transform them. This is which is exactly going against agenda AU agenda 2063, which put a framework, created a framework for Africa to be able to create the proper environment that will be conducive to the industrialization of the continent. And so it's a shame that we get into that situation in that area, but it's the only route. And we look at what Dangote is doing, and we look at what Mr. Dangote and the headwinds that he's facing, the challenges or the opposition that he's facing, from Western countries. When he's trying to build pipelines, oil pipelines between different regions in Africa. They don't like that. It's not something that they like to see. But we have to fight. It behooves us fighting for what we want. It's not because somebody doesn't want something that you just say, okay, all right, so you give up. No, you have to fight. You have to insist. And slowly, you're going to build your value chain. Before we know, the whole continent is already intertwined. And so I think the route to go is what Mr. Ramaphosa said in his speech, during our SADC meeting, and we all have to follow that. And many other organizations are deriving the policies from the AU visions of Agenda 2063, which includes, all these topics, which are African development through value chain creation, infrastructure building, manufacturing of products, stop selling raw materials to Western countries. That is the recipe for the future of the continent.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Achille EKEU. With you, SHARMA, let's now try to understand how regional action can position Africa more competitively, especially in this era of global transition. Dr. EKEU just highlighted the situation in the Middle East, and we are also seeing some sort of, we can call it geopolitics of resistance, where some countries that have not been listed as under the acclaimed superpowers are able to defend themselves at a level of security, defense, and of course trade and other aspects. So let's try to contextualize it with the African the continent in your own perspective, and probably with some succinct examples. How can regional action position Africa more competitively, especially in line with global supply chains?
Clarisse, I think there is no confusion on what is to be done. Almost everyone is certain that what is to be done. Everyone has been talking about, I don't know for how many years and decades, that Africa is the continent of the future. Africa is holding 30% of global critical minerals, and Africa is having this percent of this mineral, that percent of that mineral. So no one is confused about the scale and the scope that Africa has, the potentiality that Africa has. The only confusion that I think exists is how to do it, how to go about this, and to turn the potentiality into actuality. And that is something where there has been divergent opinions. One way of doing it, obviously, when you do value chain, when you increase the investment in your own value generation and value chains, you need technology, you need money, you do need support, international support to get those technologies. But would that mean that your own sovereignty, that you have very, you fought for many years and centuries to get that hard-earned sovereignty, are you willing to compromise on that? Because independence is a premium in today's world, and it has a price. Professor Achille was mentioning about Iran, that how Iran has been successfully defending itself against, and not only defending, sometimes it gets on the offensive as well, against the so-called world's biggest and most powerful country on the earth. The reason is, the answer is not very simple. Iran's independence comes at a cost. and that cost Iranian leadership was willing to pay. For years and years they were secluded from the entire world. They have been ostracized from global organizations. Their oil supply was cut, but they navigated their own path. They developed, they invested in their own technologies. Now remember, Iran is a country which is not importing drones, rather which is exporting drones. A country which was under severe sanctions from the world powers is a country that is supplying drones to Russia, one of the world's biggest power. That shows that your own investment in your own technology, in local resources, is going to come to your rescue. No other power will come. And if they will come, the answer will be the second, a new scramble for Africa. The answer will not be, it may come in a new form. You may not have a conference in Berlin and the leaders from the Europe come together to divide and take their share in Africa. It may happen very well in Durban. It may happen very well in Nairobi. It may happen very well in Cairo. But the idea is, the question is, how is Africa going to do this? And the answer is not very simple. I do not have anyone to answer. Had I been the advisor to the African governments or the African Union, I would have certainly found myself in a very difficult spot if I was asked this question, because the answer is not very simple. One fact which suggests this, the dichotomy is 30% of global critical chains mineral reserves is in Africa. But and if you translate these into numbers, it comes around more than $30 trillion only in critical mineral chain that is beneath your earth, on the ground. $30 trillion is about or more than the size of American GDP. And what is your GDP now? It is also almost 10 times the size of your current GDP of the entire continent. And out of that, almost more than 1/3, almost $9 trillion is unutilized, underdeveloped, or not developed at all. How are you going to invest, and how are you going to extract those technologies and extract those technologies yourself? Because most of the countries which have been producing these resources, they are not processing it. 80%, 70% of the global supply of cobalt comes from Congo. But is Congo, how many processing facilities are there in Congo? How many? China is the biggest processor of critical minerals. 85% of global critical mineral supply comes from China. But the answer is also not that you seclude yourself, you impose the bans. As I understand, as many as I think 13 countries have imposed some kind of restrictions or ban on raw mineral supply. But that has not helped Africa. Surprisingly, when Congo stalled its exports of raw cobalt, Zimbabwe, when Zimbabwe stalled the export of lithium, it was supposed to that lithium prices will go up, everyone will come asking for Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe's economy will flourish. But that has not happened. That has not happened because Zimbabwe did not initially build its own industrial base. So when Zimbabwe imposed that ban and Zimbabwe denied the access to its raw materials to the world, it increased the lithium prices across the world, but it did not activate the investment that should have happened and that should have come to Zimbabwe. And it even left because Zimbabwe had only one plant that was actively processing the lithium ores. So the answer is a complicated one. You need to maintain your sovereignty. You cannot lose that sovereign right over your resources, over your political integrity and options. But you will also need to bring in foreign powers, foreign technology, because if you choose either of the way, you have problems. One way you lose sovereignty, the other way you may have your sovereignty, but you may not develop it to the scale that you want. We do have very good example from Indonesia. When Indonesia imposed, ban on, I believe, nickel, uh, Indonesia has had one of the biggest production capacity in the world, but it led to almost $80 billion of investment from China because because Indonesia had these small investment, had this industrial base which could be developed at a larger scale and which could be built into a processing hub that could be supplied to different parts of the world. So in this way, to your question that how could regional integration help? Regional integration could help in many ways, but to give two, three important points. One by collecting, one by bringing in revenue, investment in these technologies coming together, not only in revenue, also bringing in together technologies. Like I remember very long ago, I read somewhere that South Africa has this technology of turning coal into into petroleum or gas, into liquid fuel. Now, this technology South Africa has and very limited countries has. How many African countries has the technology been transferred to? So if South Africa develops a technology and if it does not transfer it to some African country, and if you not develop it as a group, how are you going to grow and to turn that potentiality into actuality? And similarly, different African countries can have their own contribution, come together, share the technology, build their own industrial base, and then you will see Africa will do wonders. There's no doubt about it.
Let me stay with you, SHARMA. From what you have said, let's try to understand how some sort of collective diplomacy and sovereignty can be another solution that will really protect the regional bodies across the African continent. How relevant is collective diplomacy and sovereignty in ensuring resource protection, and which will now translate into real development across the African continent without ending just on books?
No, that's what my point is, that we should not confuse and we should not be under the impression that any collective grouping is itself an answer. Just you come together under a collective and that will solve all your problems. That is not going to happen, because we do have very limited examples of collective groupings doing well, but we know examples are replete of organizations, collective organizations failing miserably. Across the world, it's not one part of in Africa or any one part of the world. Across the world, you have n number of organizations, n numbers of groupings that have been formed in the name of collective security or collective well-being, collective growth, and they have not done well, because collectivity is in itself not an answer. The answer is the integration of collectivity with the development of local industrial bases, of local economy, local society, the local markets. So the answer, which I will reiterate, the answer is integration of local markets, development of local base with this collective association, and this collective association will be used as a tool to leverage during negotiations, because if a small country like Congo or maybe Malawi, if it negotiates on some points with a country like America, USA, or Britain, or maybe even China or India, you see the difference that is on the table. A country is as small as Malawi and a country as big as USA or China. So the negotiation can never be very equitable and very fair. But when SADC negotiates on behalf of all the South African development countries, it brings weight on the table. It brings the part of all these members of the SADC. But that weight, that the presence only works when these countries themselves have basis to absorb those investments. If I'm going to invest maybe $2 billion or $100 billion, is there enough potential? Are there enough local basis, mechanisms to absorb my investment? If not, everything is going to falter. Nothing is going to work. So something that worked in Indonesia The same example did not work in the case of Zimbabwe. The reason being that Zimbabwe did not have the capacity to absorb those investments that would have come had there been local support. The same investment were absorbed by Indonesia because Indonesia had those support mechanisms. Indonesia had those startups, local systems. So to go about it, the answer is integration with national local development, industrial creation of industrial basis. Then only any integration works. Otherwise, we can every organization will reduce itself only to be a talking shop, talk shop. You will come, say all the good things, rosy things, put a different target every year. Nothing happens. I come from India. We do have a SARC. We do had an organization founded in 1985, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It did not work because the countries, it did not work because there were so many factors. One was that two rival powers were there, but also because the integration never happened. Also because some of the countries never developed the industrial scale that they need to develop. And so investment, if it has to happen, they are not able to absorb those investments. Yeah. So yeah, I think I've made my point clear.
Indeed, of course, thank you so much. And how can we navigate this aspect with you, Dr. Achille Eke? We want to now ask, aside integration, let's look at integration in terms of common rules on mineral licensing, maybe taxation, local content and export restrictions. Do you see this as a practical way to ensure that together as a regional bloc, the continent can, protect its resources to meet the desired or anticipated outcome underlined under the, different regional groupings?
I think the point that Mr. Sharma made earlier is important. It's just by itself, the different groups that we have, different regional groups that we have, they're not necessarily going to work. It's good to have local industries already ready, the market, the policies of these different governments, have to be integrated, because if one person is doing X, the other person is doing Y, or if one country is selling, or two countries selling the same products, competing against each other, it's not going to work, because what happens is that Western countries are smart, which, when Trump came to power, he refused to negotiate with big entities like European Union and Asian Association or whatever commerce. So he refused to negotiate with those big entities because in doing so, he is going to be overwhelmed. He's not going to be able to play his game. So he wanted to go country by country, and so that's what he did. You see what he did when he was trying to conquer Greenland. Yeah. He's trying to go country by country. Each country, especially with these tariffs, the tariff that he's been applying to all these different countries. He doesn't want to face a block of European unions, of Asian countries or African countries. No, he doesn't want to face that. So we have to be smart as well, in these negotiations. So the integration that you mentioned is very critical. It's a very key element. But for me, what tops it all is the political will, because when there's political will, and that means that we have to have political leaders that are very keen in working towards the interests of their people, not their own political interests or their own pockets. That's the key, because when you have corrupt leaders, they can pretend to be part of the SADC organization or the ECOWAS or any other organization, but they are easily corrupted. So any project that the region puts in place, it never works because they are conflicting interests. They have conflicting interests behind, And every time there's conflicting interest, it's always the personal interest that wins. And no regional project can work like that, let alone on the continent, on the whole continent level, which is where Africa wants to go. They want to have a whole continental level policy that every country in Africa can follow, so that we can fight together. We can have use our leverage of having the resources, the minerals that the Western countries need, having the population that we have, the youth that we have in the continent, that is the future of the continent, which is a market that every country, every organization, every company wants to tap into. But we are not doing that properly. We don't have the technology yet. We don't have the will, the political will, which is the first condition yet to be able to make that work. But I think even though it's hard, we still have to continue to fight, because every baby step that we take, I always come back to the silent country. Every baby step that we take is going to take us, slowly to where we want to be. And it's a long process of decolonizing people's minds. Not just the leaders, even the population, the business leaders that we have, because colonization has an impact in the sense that when you are corrupt, you don't understand the rules. You don't want to follow rules. You always want to have a relation. You want to do business in a way that always evades the government oversight, evades paying taxes. All these things. And so so people have to be understanding that they have to do business properly, pay taxes properly, and then but fight for what they're supposed to get, and get what they're supposed to get. So that's the challenge that Africa has, and that's not going to happen overnight. It's a process that's going to take time, but we are hopeful that what the silent countries are showing us, for example, because there's a political will that is already set.
Absolutely.
And they work together every day. Those three countries get together in meetings for different topics, with different issues: industrialization, the economy, political, anything that's that's dealing with the interests of the people. They work together as a team, which is the template that we all should follow, which is not good for Western countries, which is exactly what we need to do.
Absolutely, learning internationally, globally, and applying locally, contextualizing with the realities on the ground. If you are just tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome. This is your informative and knowledge sharing program, Global Insights, brought to you by Globus. And now, of course, we're trying to understand, to compromise the stakes of regional integration, resource protection, and looking at how the positive aspect of this unity and can be harnessed to ensure that Africa's mineral resources, even the human resources, are actually used to benefit the African continent in spite of its international engagement, be it with the private sector, investors, and or probably governments at large. And it's on this note that we're going to invite us all to listen to the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was speaking and addressing his peers still in Durban, highlighting the aspects which we also pointed out in our preamble, looking at the aspect of funding and how can funding activities try to be like an obstacle to this regional cooperation versus the resource protection. And he reiterated the need for Africa to rely on its own capacity in spite its engagement with international partners, which to an extent translates into some sort of Africa putting its agenda at the helm while navigating corporations at international level. So we are going to listen to him, and of course we'll join you right after that.
The primary goal of this team is, among us, to ensure that we add value to our heritage-based resources and move away from exporting raw materials by local processing, mining, and manufacturing capacities across Southern Africa. This will boost intra-SADC trade while harmonizing regulations in agro-processing and infrastructure development. By processing our minerals, we create jobs, foster innovation, and retain the value that rightfully belongs to our people. As Zimbabwe, we are emboldened with our national development philosophy, ilizwe lakhiwa, libuswe, likwelekelwe nabanikazi balo, nyika inovakwa, igotongwa, ikonomatigwa nebene bayo. This timeless truth entails that nations, cities, and regions are built by their own people. This is, by and large, our rallying call for self-determination. By placing our people at the core of our development agenda, we ensure that the wealth of our region benefits our citizens and improve their quality of life. While we value our international partnerships, experience and hindsight on external funding, which is the risk to compromise our sovereignty and national priorities. We must therefore build and enhance our own financial and industrial capabilities. The operationalization of the SADC Regional Development Fund is timely and remains a cornerstone for our developmental agenda and strategy. I commend the progress realized to date and appeal to those member states who are yet to sign or ratify this critical protocol to do so. Our people are an important resource to build our region. We must empower them through education and skills development. In Zimbabwe, our heritage-based education 5.0 model continues to integrate our rich indigenous knowledge systems with contemporary scientific inquiry, innovation, technology, to accelerate industrialization and modernization. This is further ensuring that our talented young people look at their rich heritage not as a relic of the past, but as a solid foundation to build a more prosperous future. As a region, we have a duty to continue investing in education systems that produce solutions, reclaiming our identity and nurturing generations that believe in our unique capabilities as a people. Meanwhile, progress made in the implementation of high-impact regional infrastructure projects, including those nearing completion, is encouraging. The completion of the Kazungula water project is worth celebrating and set to provide clean water to residents and the border users. Additional collective investments in the SADC Water Fund and transboundary water cooperation deserve our support towards safeguarding and guaranteeing this most precious resource for generations to come. Advancement in meteorological observation is sharpening our agricultural planning, strengthening early warning systems, and bolstering disaster preparedness. These achievements are pillars of resilience upon which we will build a prosperous and sustainable future for all our people.
And that was the president of Zimbabwe. Of course, the core question is we're looking at how funding can affect these regional strategies that seek actually to protect resources in order to translate them into real development affecting positively the lives of local citizens. So who will finance regional infrastructure, and how can this benefit local communities, and also can this finance go without sovereignty at stake? And of course, this question will be answered by Dr. Eddie Erika, a global analyst, executive secretary, committee of action for Cote d'Ivoire, who is joining us at this juncture. You are most welcome to this platform, Dr. Eddie Erika, as we continue to talk relevant issues concerning the African continent and the world at large.
Clarisse, thank you so much for having me one more time. Apologies to the watchers and listeners of this wonderful program for the lateness with which I joined the program on this day due to some technical difficulties. But it's always a pleasure, as I said, to be sharing the stage with my co-panelists, and I say hi to them. To the question that you ask, my brief and preliminary answers will be that we are, again, in terms of resources, at the moment, Africa, it's in general has become, and I'm sure that my co-panelists, already probably shared, these perspectives. Pardon me to come back on that, but the continent, in the past decades, and I would say in the last 5 years, has become the center stage of Africa, the world's Russia to critical minerals and important materials. With that being said, we are looking at mineral resources that are important for batteries, for car manufacturing, cell phones, and all that, which means that this increase is putting, again, Africa at the center of this geopolitical reshuffling that we are seeing. The question will be this. We are glad to hear from African head of states some new initiatives in the sense of protecting those minerals. The big question that we are asking ourselves, we should continue to ask ourselves, is again, how effective those plans, those strategies, those theories will be. To give some examples, you have the countries such as Zambia, which is the leading, one of the leading producers of copper. We know that, the Zambian government has embarked in a mission of diversifying its sources of revenues, but at the same time also securing and making sure that, you have a proper financing, but also proper revenues, right? A proper tracking and tracing of the revenues. However, when you look at the statistics, we're up to, as of last year, from the Zambian, government itself, what is being declared as material mineral resources that are exploited and exported, there is always a discrepancy between what is being declared, what is actually being exported, and then the amount of money, of course, that comes in there as well. That's number one. But number two, there is also this idea of opening the doors to investors. We are all aware of what is going on in the southern tip of Africa when it comes to African mineral resources, where China, of course, is leading the way, but you are looking at the Lobito corridor. You are looking at other initiatives that are actually being funded by external resources. The Lobito corridor, we know, is the United States with the European Union, which is, of course, we're being presented as a strong competitor to the Belt and Road Initiative, which is, of course, financed by China. We have the same thing, in other parts, as of 2 years ago, in Guinea, French-speaking Guinea, in West Africa, you have the largest world iron producing mines, mine that has been put now is in operation, the Simandou project, as we said, but this Simandou project is also the financing in there is coming from a consortium of external funders, which means, as I heard the Minister of Finance of Guinea speaking about the opening of this Simandou project, how happy he was that, we're investment in these mines and the extractions of those minerals will come. The Guinean state, we invested about, only 12%, and the rest of the financing or investment in that sector is coming from partners, external partners. This raised my eyebrows, my dear sister, raised my eyebrows. Why? Because if we are happy that the government of Guinea is investing only 12%, and that, whatever revenues that will make out of the exploitation of the Simandou project in Guinea is going to be tremendous. At the same time, the question is, what will be the portion for the foreign direct investment that come in there, the countries that are putting this investment in? When we look at that, very definitely, as you talk about the financing, the structure that we are observing so far showed clearly that most of the financing for these important critical minerals and materials that will be coming from outside, which means that in return, Africa will continue to lose for the larger portion. This is Clarisse, what I wanted to mention in my opening speech to answer your question about, where this financing, where will come from. And of course, Africa's, sovereignty will continue to be at stake in here, because as long as, we do not control that. Actually, one last fact I want to mention very quickly is, as we talk about, what these minerals, and we talk about these resources and all that, and the efforts to make sure that, what they are properly managed, we should not also forget that there is what we call the legal, open, industrial, exploitation of those resources, but there is also the illegal, right, exploitation or the illegal mining that we talk about. This is become more and more of a tragedy for the African continent. When we currently look at what is going on in Cote d'Ivoire, you have water pollution, environmental pollution at a scale never imagined before. This is also an attempt or an attack or a threat to the sovereignty of those African countries, and I want to yield on that.
I'll stay with you, Dr. Eddie, since you taught the geopolitical aspect of this, this topic. We want to look at this juncture today. There's a clear example that we want to take the Sahel region. According to some pundit, the leaders of the Sahel region have adopted a more sovereignist stance, like in wanting to probably harness and protect these resources, but then we still see regional bodies which were being highlighted, like the ECOWAS and others that are still very much aligned with the rules-based regulations that most at times you see the points end theoretically rather than the pragmatic stance which we are seeing today in the Sahel region, and that actually align or falls under the geopolitical stakes of the African continent in regional connection, resource protection, and for the a greater African agenda that will benefit the local population. So how can we actually understand the two aspects, strategies, and maybe find a common ground that will ensure that the gap is being, we circumvent the gap that is actually making this regional cooperation not fully being that competitive edge for resource protection and harmonization across the continent?
Clarisse, the way I see it is there is a continuation. Actually, the opposition between what we know as the Sahel countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, forming this AES group, and the ECOWAS, or other regional bodies that you talk about, was centered actually on the economic benefit. Let's not make that, or let's not make a mistake when it comes to that. It was a matter, it continues to be a matter of how Africa will continue to be the supplier of either raw materials, either mineral resources, or even agricultural resources. This is at stake. As we talk about, what sovereignty, again, coming back to that, Clarisse, we continue to see examples in which even the reparation, the fixing, was some important instruments when it comes to industrial production in some countries. The tools should be ordered, or the pieces should be ordered, from either France, not from any other sources. And when it is done from any other sources except from France, there is some repercussion. I'm using that example to say that the notion of the natural resources, the mineral resources in those countries, have always been at the center of the stalemate we have observed between the countries of the Sahel and the ECOWAS countries that continue, for instance, to be under the domination of the former colonial powers. Here we are talking about France. Matter of fact, recently, the whole idea of reforming the French CFA and the attempt to again push for a uniformization of the banking system with the current and the common currency under the ECU that the West African countries under the ECOWAS are pushing for, again participate into this same agenda. So the way I see it is clear. The needle must move in the direction where the countries of the Sahel are taking us. Why do I say this? I say this because as Africa becomes again and more the go-to route for this, the supply of these critical minerals and critical materials, if we want Africa and Africans population to benefit across all the spectra, right, of these critical mineral supply chains, it means that the terms of those exploitations, will need to change. There is no need to be happy that, a country is getting 12% of the exploitation or 15% of the exploitation of its own natural resources because the investment is coming from somewhere else. If we continue with this the same pattern in the next 10, 15, and 20 years, the African countries will still continue to not benefit from their own natural resources. This is clear. Second thing, if we continue on the path of not being able to control, right, illegal exploitation of those minerals, it means that, together we are participating or contributing to destroying the natural environment in which our populations are living. Let us not forget that, agriculture continues to be a very great contributor to those countries in the world GDP, most of the African countries. Let us not forget that, for countries that are not self-sufficient when it comes to foods, right? Land becomes very important in here. Let us not forget that, this illegal mining also, right? Controlling it is a part of the strategy to control the minerals. And once we do that effectively, we control the environment. If not, we are running into a disaster. Again, let's look, maybe do next time a focus on what is going on in Cote d'Ivoire. And I'm sure it is not limited to Cote d'Ivoire only. If it goes on in Cote d'Ivoire, I'm sure that Liberia is also impacted. I spoke with some friends from Cameroon that told me the same thing is also going on in Cameroon. It means that in the next 10 or even 5 to next 10 years, we will have an increased exponential increase in terms of what? Health issues, cancer, because we are talking about mercury. We are talking about products that are very dangerous for our human bodies that are being used actually for this illegal mining. So, Clarisse, to come back onto that, the needle has to move in the direction of the countries of the direction that the country of the Sahel are taking. If we don't go this way, all that we are doing in terms of the African Free Continental Trade Agreements, in terms of the regional trade agreement that exists between the different countries at the sub-regional level, all of those things will not allow or will not position Africa to reach the objectives of Agenda, I think, 2060, as we talk about. Let me yield on that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eddie. And coming briefly back to you, Sharma, it is imperative to get from the last point that Dr. Eddie highlighted for us to understand at this juncture how we can ensure physical security or even environmental protection that will actually, be some sort of a support to ensure that the vibrant population across the African continent is not frail by the time there is some sort of enhanced industrialization to be able to transform these mineral resources.
I think the point made by Prof. is absolutely genuine and makes sense. But the larger point which I want to capture is that the answer lies in what AU itself admits, the idea of subsidiarity, that you build up from the regional economic communities and don't lead straight to the continental federation. And you already, AU already recognizes 8 RDCs, SADC, Orbit, COMESA, ECOWAS, IGAD, AMU, and all that. So the question is not about whether these formations exist or not, or whether how they should integrate or not. One is obviously of subsidiarity. One larger point which I want to come to, which also Professor actually mentioned in his remarks, is the lack of political will. And that lack of political will, I believe, emanates from, I'm sorry to say that, in Africa, I do not see a single leader who transcends the national boundary and captures the African imagination. Do we have a Nyerere? Do we have a Mandela? Do we have, Nkrumah? No. Is there any African leader who captures the imagination of the entire African continent? Is there any African leader for whom the boundaries of their own national or own nation does not matter as an idea of as a Pan-Africanist, and who thinks for the Africa as a whole? I do not think there is any one African leader, and that is why when you see these frameworks failing, because if you read the texts of African Union, or if you go by the Abuja Treaty agreements, if you read, it looks very well prepared text, very well planned. The problem lies in execution. And the problem lies in execution because, one, obviously you suffer from what in geopolitics we call resource curse. Now that resource enables the different groups to vouch for, to look for the same resources, and then conflict emerges, then there is foreign interference, all of that. But the more important reason is the lack of political will, the lack of continental consensus to develop. You do have AU working there, you do have different formations working there, you do, everyone talks about Africa should unite, Africa should unite. Who is stopping Africa to unite? Oh no, for how long will we keep talking about Africa should come together, we should be Pan-Africanist, we should invest in our technology, we should invest in our resource generation, value creation. Who is stopping Africa doing that? The problem emanates from within, and the problem what emanates from within has to be handled and answered from within as well. As a continental free trade agreement, African Continental Free Trade Agreement is the largest by the country count, 54 countries. But it is the smallest, comparing to the other continental trade agreements. It is the least performing free trade continental agreements. Intra-trade in Africa's intra-trade is only about 15 to 18% of its total trade. Africa cannot develop until and unless it also consumes. Africa has been largely seen through the lens of being a manufacturer, a creator. It will export to the world, being exporter of the world. But Africa will develop only when its production, its manufacturing gets complemented with the consumption. There needs to be a developed consumption market which also consumes what is developed. And for that, coming back to my previous remarks, you will need to invest in those technologies. Obviously, it is not going to happen in one day. It is not going to happen in 1 year, and there will be a cost to it. Whichever country we talk about, there has been costs attached to any regional or continental transformation, and that cost would be that you will not have enough at your disposal to invest in those technologies. You will have to compromise somewhere. There's already in the continental agreement there is a 10 billion fund to cover those costs. That is not enough. I understand, and everyone will agree that $10 billion is not enough to cover those costs, but it can substantially help, and as gradually we proceed there, we can cover those costs. And another part of remaining sovereign is that you may still have 8 or 10% of your resources or something that is exclusive to your own national boundary. You can exclude that, and there can be agreements where some of the components can be excluded from the regional integration framework, and that remains crucial to its the individual country's development. But overall, the costs that comes with it has to be combined, has to be meted out by the grouping. We do not need to expect a rapid overturn and a rapid improvement in situations. There is a cost, there will be a time, but it will only happen through African consensus, through people who transcend their national petty political interest, who to develop the political will that seeks true Pan-Africanism, that seeks the well-being of their own, not only the countrymen but also of their their friends and fellows from the continent of Africa, and that is where your answer lies, Clarisse.
Thank you so much. Of course, the answer lies from within. Let's get your own perspective on this aspect, Dr. Achille Ekei. Now that, according to SHARMA, the answer lies from within. There is nobody stopping Africa from actually uniting. So I remember the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, once stated that there is need alongside other African presidents that we need to provide African solutions to African problems. And it brings us again to understanding what SHARMA just highlighted. So this solution from within, let's try to look at political will. When talking about this political will, are we limiting it at the level of heads of states, or what other stakeholders are involved that can help us, maybe the continent, navigate this political will practically, that can actually translate into seeing some clear decisions, practical decisions taken in line with harnessing Africa's resources for the benefits of the continent?
That's a very good question, and I think what Dr. Edi said earlier is very important. That the way Africa should go is the way of the Sahelian countries today, because that's the best blueprint that we see today. That independent leaders with political will to serve their people, are providing the means, and they are willing to sacrifice what is needed. They're using their own resources. They're financing their project with their own resources without asking the World Bank and IMF and all these predators to come and provide them with financing. So that's the blueprint Africa should follow. That's the way. In that sense, that's the way Africa should go, because there's no way of having our organizations. The African Union is being financed by Western countries. All these regional, ECOWAS, SADC, all that stuff, they're being financed by Western countries. They want to finance. The reason is because they want to control. Who finances controls, right? So even when you create an organization and you don't want to include the Western country, you don't want to take their money, well, they're going to fight tooth and nail to force you to accept their money. They're going to create situations, to create a need for them to participate in the funding and financing of the organization, because they want to have the total control of the organization, and no one is planning what are the plans of the organization, how they're going to finance it, so they can report to the Western countries, so they can have a leverage on us. And that is the challenge we have. So political will itself is not enough, but we have to be able to change the mentality of our business leaders as well. It's not just a political will on the from leaders themselves. It's also the environment. Because see, Western countries, before they get to the leader, they go around. They're gonna tap into the people that are working with the leaders, and those people are going to change, tweak things, introduce bias in reports, and then present a report to the leader for him to decide on the bias report that's favorable to Western countries. That's how they operate. Before the president signs a decree to create this organization and this priority, blah blah blah, that decree has been worked from people under the president. This is ministers, director of protocol, director of this and that. So those are the people that are handling the real paperwork to bring to the president. But those are the people that the Western countries are going to connect with, corrupt, and introduce language in the law or in the decree that is favorable to them. And when the president reads it, he feels like, okay, this is coming from our own people, so it's our own solutions. He signs it, but a couple of years later, he finds out later that it was introduced. That report was biased towards Western countries, and he had no way of knowing. So that's the way. That's the situation we have, and that's why it's very difficult, even when you are a willing leader, to do things for your people. But people that you work with, if they don't have the same frame mind, they're not. You're not going to get the outcome that you're looking for because of that corruption, and it's a very difficult situation. But we have to keep surrounding ourselves with leaders that we trust, that we know that we can vet properly, that we can control, and when we talk about control, we're not talking about controlling in a way that is dictatorial. We have to look at people's mindset, look at people's point of views, and then trace their progress, see if they have been very effective in implementing those views, so that when you bring them at the level of the government where they're supposed to work, they're not going to be corrupted easily, because they have strong views on specific issues that you're looking to implement as a leader. So that is the key to making sure that those leaders, even when they have political will, they can implement what they're trying to do. But though it's very rare right now on the continent to see those type of leaders, we see those in the Sahelian countries, in the 3 Sahelian countries, and whereas are we going to see people like that? It's very difficult, and the reason we see this from those leaders are because they are military people who have faced upheaval from France. They've been going to fight against people that have been sponsored by Western countries, and they've been on the forefront for many of them in that fight. So when they took over the power, they knew exactly what they needed to do. This, in addition to the fact that they are well versed in their history, in their roots, in serving the people, in Pan-Africanism, understanding the geopolitics of the world today, so they are able to integrate all that and then make decisions that are sound, and then stay firm against those powerful countries. When the powerful country tells you, hey, I'm going to I'm going to raise fees or taxes or tariff on your country X percent. They do the reciprocal right away, the same day before it goes down. They already publish their own reciprocal decree. So it's like tit for tat. They're playing tit for tat, and Western countries they can understand that. So that's the way to deal with them, so that psychologically, they don't have that ascent on you. When a white guy or white person comes, it's like whether an American or European, he comes to Mali, he doesn't feel like, he shouldn't feel like this is his conquered land for him. No, he should feel like this is a foreign country. I have to respect the rules of that country. I have to abide by the rules. I have to satisfy the terms of the contracts. Instead of coming in, funding, financing a project, or telling the government you're going to finance a project, and then take the project, and then midway, you start doing what we call a scope creep. So we start, creating more needs for more money, and then at the end the project is not done. The money has been, taken away, and the infrastructure doesn't exist. This is what happens in Africa. Many countries, Cameroon particularly, has a lot of these projects that started, never finished, because of scope creep. Scope creep. And scope creep is being done in purpose because the people that are intermediaries between the government and those companies, foreign companies, they want their cut. And the foreign companies also understand the game. So they overcharge for things that are priced $1. They charge $10. $20, sometimes $100 for one thing, so something that costs $100, so for something that costs $1. So and then the government doesn't know how how to fight that, because they are also corrupt. Everybody wants his share of the project, and so that's what I'm saying. The question that you ask is important. It's not just the leaders that have to change. And the political will has to go around. It's not just the leader; it's also people that the leaders are working with. Because they are the direct, people that the government are working with to implement those projects or the decisions that are made from those leaders. So
absolutely.
Very important.
Absolutely. And with you, Dr. Eddie Erika, we want to still stress more on this very important aspect of defining the political will. And of course, this time around, let's look at how competition, especially negative competition existing within countries, maybe regional bodies, and is actually providing a better scope for for competition among external powers in need of these minerals, which you highlighted already, that they need it for car battery, we need it for telephone and other aspects. So let's try to understand how political will coming from every dimension can be a solution to the lack of compromise that will align with the African agenda of resource protection, and that will translate into real industrialization and development, especially in line with developing its young population.
There is a resurgence of political discourse about the importance of empowering, positioning the African youth for the next generation, for the next 15, 20 years. There is this very interesting quote that I hear very often from political leaders, economists, about how Africa as a young population that represent the future of work, right, for the entire world. We see that coming actually with the contradictions in the, let's say, European, North, West African, Western European countries with regard to the question of immigration. On the one hand, you have a very tough policies that are implemented to stop immigration, but on the other hand, there is also the need of a labor force. with a population that is not replenishing itself or recreating itself, this labor force, of course, is going to come from immigration. It is very contradictory, Clarisse, that we see, for instance, in North America, the United States taking, a very tough measure to limit, its immigration, curtail that. But at the same time, we have Canada that is inviting, qualified and skilled labor force, to work for them. Where do I go with this? Where am I going with this is that the question is, again, how does that tie with the question of a political will? A country such as Kenya, a country such as Malawi, and countries, and there's another country that I forget, in here recently, took clear measures at the highest level, at the political level, at the state and the government level. They took clear aim at facilitating what they call a channel and control labor migration to the countries of the Middle Eastern countries, or to the countries Dubai and then these new developing countries. This kind of political will can exist, and for those leaders who have taken these measures with the government, it is a question of helping to resolve the job crisis in Africa. Second thing I want to mention as backdrop before I answer the question is this whole notion of jobless growth. All of those things that we talked about, the massive and huge investment that we have witnessed lately in the sector of critical mineral, critical materials, and even other sectors that benefited from foreign development investments, created, some sort of economic growth for those countries. It does not necessarily translate into the well-being and the wellness of the populations, but at least when we measure the GDP, you measure the PNI and all of those things, we talk about growth. The question again that researchers are putting and economists are putting in front of us is, to what extent these foreign direct investments have created a sufficient number of jobs to actually resolve the jobless issue that we see in Africa, which continues to fuel immigration or migration through the immigration channels. When we put all that together, Clarisse, these are two examples that I took in here, it means that the notion of political will, if it is effectively followed, can be a game changer. How do we arrive at that? Well, there are so many things, and I agree with my brother ACHILLE here, doctor, when he says that it must include and it has to involve so many dimensions. Number one, we cannot shy away from the fact that the people normally, through what we call elections, have given their power to somebody elected who form a government to represent them and to negotiate their national community interests, not just at the national level, at the regional level, at the African level, but also at the global level with other countries. So when you have leaders that one day tells you one thing about, how they care about the wellness, the well-being of the people, and turns around to sign some contract, whether it is for fishing, whether it's for the exploitation of the natural resources that give the countries the smallest portion of the stick, you got to question their sovereignty themselves. You got to question these leaders' ability to uphold, right, the oath that they took when they won the so-called elections. So it is a level of these leaders. How do we hold them accountable? I believe different countries, all of the African countries, especially those that are endowed with mineral resources, have what we call a mining code. Let people know about the mining codes. Let the people know, and when I tell the people here, not just the educated ones, but even the people in the village, in the rural areas.
Yeah.
To what extent we make them understand the value of those critical minerals? The people who are working, right, in those illegal mines, or sometimes working barehanded in those mines in Central African Republic and die because there is a cause, or in the Congo to exploit, cobalt, or now that we are seeing Cote d'Ivoire with gold and all of those things. To what extent they are very aware that the gold or the mineral that they are finding, they are working to get, lands in somewhere in an international markets. How do they know that? So there is a level of these people as well. This is where, Clarisse, I believe that civil society organizations, will get themselves involved as well. And as I mentioned, civil society organizations, you also have the trade unions. It is a clear field for them to get into as well. But as we say all of those things, there is another aspect that we should not forget. It is the aspect of force. Foreign direct investments comes with a force behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Financial force, yes, but military force as well.
Mm-hmm.
When in the 1960s, Patrice Lumumba stood to say that now Congo for the Congolese, we know what happens. When some other countries, whether it is even under Pascal Lissouba, to take aim at the French, or at the France in general, in terms of how Congo's oil was being exploited through else, we knew what happened to him. And we knew who was behind that. So I can refer people to the French-Africa Connection, this documentary that Al Jazeera put together in 3 parts in 2011-2012. It is still valid up to today. How well, therefore, are the African countries ready to oppose this kind of external forces that will march in, for instance? It will be very critical for us to address this. So I talk about the people, I talk about the civil society organizations, the trade unions, I talk about the force that we have at the geopolitical level, and I talk about the African government. To put all of these things together, Clarisse, as long as we continue to elect people who rig the elections, one. As long as we continue to have at the head of our countries people who have 100%, or let's say 95% of the external powers' interest versus 5% of their own country's interest at the head, we're going to have this kind of problems. As long as my co-panelist Sharma said, we continue to see intra-African trades at less or proportion compared to the Africa external trade being humongous, we are going to witness what we witness. And you talk about the competition. Yes, there continues to be stronger competition between those African countries, even those that share, especially those that share neighbor borders. The competition comes in the form of Rwanda. One is to have a taste of the Congolese, minerals, and we see what it produces. How well and documented we know that Rwanda is involved in the ongoing conflict, that is maiming the population in India. We know what is happening, in West Africa. We know what happened in West Africa between, in Liberia, how Cote d'Ivoire was involved in the crisis in Liberia to a certain extent. What were the dividends? Even when the crisis in Cote d'Ivoire started years ago, and we are talking about the exploitation, illegal exploitation of the mining resources in the northern part of Cote d'Ivoire, when it was split into two, with the northern part occupied by the rebel organization. We know how it benefited the countries of the Sahel, especially Burkina Faso at the time under President Blaise Compaoré. So when we look at this internal competition as well, there is a thing that, we have a long way to go, but it is not hopeless. Again, I'm going to submit that the direction taken by the countries of the Sahel when it comes to securing the natural resources, it does not mean that those countries refuse to trade. I don't think I heard that.
Absolutely.
No.
All they are saying is we need to have an upper hand about how much we are trading and how well we are tracing the money that we get from there, because the mines, the critical minerals are actually one of the best sectors where you have illicit financial flows out of Africa becoming prominent. Kleptocracy in those fields. It is clear, and research proved it. When in Nigeria, for instance, people report that, oh yes, we are sending, or we have exploited, or we have actually collected 70 barrels, and I'm taking just a number like that. The actual number is not 70 barrels. It can be, triple that. It can be quadruple that. So where does the difference go? So Clarisse, these are the critical issues of a competition that I talk about, or other dimension of this competition between countries, because money that is stolen from the critical minerals and the mines in Cote d'Ivoire does not stay in Cote d'Ivoire. It goes through maybe Liberia or Nigeria to go somewhere else. How well those countries have a tight knit to make sure that, at the African level first, at the sub-regional level, they are able to control these illicit financial flows, or the money that illegally left those countries, or even the critical minerals that illegally leave one country, go through one, and that gets to another one, or to the entire world. So Clarisse, I agree that this competition is killing us. But again, I believe that the leaders that we elect, the government that we have, the ministers that are in there with the contract that are signed, but the people themselves also need to be aware of what is going on. And then finally, the civil society organization will have a huge role to play in this sensitization of raising people's awareness. And finally, we need to be in the position where we are able to protect ourselves from any weapon that is utilized against. Wherever you have gold illegally mined, you have weapons. Absolutely. I can refer you to what happened in Sierra Leone, right? I can refer you to what happened in Liberia again. We can refer to you to what is happening in the Congo. Since 1960, the country, the United Nations has the longest serving, a peacekeeping mission in the world. It is in the Congo, since 1960. And they're still present in there, but the country is at war. Why? There is a clear direction or correlation with the minds that the whole world needs.
And that is where the problematic lies, ladies and gentlemen. We have just some 8 minutes to still be together, and this is a point where we get to bring some key recommendations as to, in line with the points which have been highlighted. And I kick off with you, Sharma, especially adding to what Dr. Edi highlighted at this juncture. So how can we, at this moment, or maybe regional blocks across Africa, be it SADC, ECOWAS, the Maghreb, the Sahel region, how can they actually reconcile these, negative aspects of regional that actually put some sort of fragility in terms of regional groupings to meet up with the overall agenda of the continent?
Oh, well, absolutely. I agree with whatever Dr. Edi has said. And there are many layers to it. It is a multidimensional question. And you do have to answer on different fronts. Any one unilateral approach is not going to work. But let me come back to what Professor Dr. Edi was saying, that the political will and the support and the Sahelian approach that we all have been talking about. One thing I think which we have missed so far is that the people's support. It's not only that one day the military takes over the rule and they do have a coup, what they call coup, and they are a GR, but that is also complemented with the popular support that these dispensations are getting. So that tells you that people at large are willing to to support the causes that talks of bringing resources at home, that talks of resource nationalism, that talks of having your own say, to bringing sovereignty into discussion. Just the other day I was having a chat with the Niger's ambassador to India, and he was showing me all the pictures, and we had a long discussion about the things and how what has happened after the coup in Niger. The reason why it has unsettled some of the foreign powers, and the reason why it brings in so much attention, global attention, is that there is popular, the leaders have been able to muster popular support, and the people at large are willing to, even if there are consequences of the sanctions or the consequences of the change, because any gradual shift from moving away from ECOWAS and gradually moving away from the French franc system, it will take some time and it will have its repercussions. But the people at large are willing to pay for those changes when it comes to bringing their own sovereignty, bring their own resources to for their own use. And the problems about failure, I think, lies in your own examples. Africa is replete with examples of groupings failing also. I believe that the first EAC, Eastern African Community, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, in the region it failed, can be a case study for the future groupings and the future in the way the continental or the regional integration should go. The region it failed was because of unequal distribution of gains. Kenya, which used to which grew in those periods at a rapid pace. Kenya captured a rapidly growing share of the Eastern African community, whereas Uganda's share, it drastically gets reduced and diminished, and that is the reason within 10 years that the initial EAC was dismissed. So the answer and in the way ahead would be that integration, any sort of integration, without a credible and well-funded compensation mechanism for these states that structurally cannot compete industrially yet. They need some time, they need resources, they need management, they need the support. It tends to fracture and it will not consolidate. The more advanced economy pulls ahead, the less advanced ones pulls out. So it needs to be a more equitable approach with all the countries, all the members, and if there's going to be some losses, that losses are being absorbed equitably. If there are going to be gains, that gains have to be distributed equitably. Is the way Africa should move ahead. And I believe the people at large, who are the real bosses, have the support for all these causes. They are not going to have problems. Any foreign propaganda or any foreign intervention, okay, I think will not work till the awareness on that count.
Thank you so much, SHARMA, and of course, coming to you, Dr. Achille Ekei. I want us to probably leave with this question. Dr. Eddie just highlighted the role that the civil society has to play to be able to meet up with the continental agenda of regional cooperation, resource protection, for the benefit of the African continent. But today, critically, when we look at civil society, we understand that majority of them are, according to some pundits, view as opposition to existing, governments, and of course, with different agendas. So how can we now navigate or reconcile this perspective, if actually there's veracity in it, to be able to make the civil society understand its role it has to play in enhancing regional cooperation, probably among people-to-people diplomacy away from government, so that some of these aspects of illicit financial flows and other aspects inhibiting continental unity and resource protections can be handled tactically and practically?
Okay, this is important because, in order for the society, for the continent or Africa as a whole to be able to be successful, the contribution of civil society is critical, because otherwise, it's not going to work. And, I would say civil society is indispensable to this agenda because it turns resource protection from a government promise, which is what government do, they promise things, But so they're critical in turning those promises into a matter of public accountability, right? So those civil society can expose unfair deals, for example, protect communities, demand transparency, into those different projects. They can also monitor environmental harm or ensure that mineral revenues are used for the purpose, the purpose they're there for, which is development of the country, rather than captured by political or social elites. So that's the key here. The key role that civil society have to do. Contract transparency is important. Because it's going to allow, it's going to make it harder for those leaders to hide, undervalued concessions. Trying to avoid taxes, tax avoidance. Illicit payments, for example, all these things that the people don't usually pay attention to in the general public, but we have a very strong civil society that that's very organized, is very structured, very well structured, that can hold those leaders accountable in terms of transparency, and also independent oversight, instead of having these contracts that are made, by easy agreements between the government and some corrupt leader or some corrupt enterprise. There should be some oversight as to how these projects are being implemented, how is the financing being done, how is the progress of the implementation of the project on the field is being done. So they have to. There should be some scrutiny as to how these projects are being implemented. So in terms of community representation, it's also important that the community be represented through those through the civil society, to ensure that those projects have the social legitimacy, and that they're supposed to have, and that communities receive the full benefit of those projects. So we can talk about other things, for example, environmental protection, anti-corruption work. All these have to be under the umbrella of transparency. So the role, to answer the question, the role of society is critical. Otherwise, there will be no accountability. There is no follow through and follow up on of these projects, and the funding that the government, whether it's through loans, the financing of those projects through loans or through investments, local investments, they could be dissipated very easily if there is no accountability. And so I would say clearly that civil society has a big role to play here, and that's what is lacking on the continent right now, because politicians don't feel the need to be accountable to people. They can easily corrupt. When an organization raises an issue, it's very, very quickly the government or the entity that is concerned by that issue, easily, instead of fixing the issue, they want to go to the entity that raised the concerns and try to corrupt them easily. Try to corrupt them with a blank check. They give you a blank check and say, okay, how much do you want? And then you give your price, and they give you, and then the issue is, there is no more addressing the issue, because there's no more person to raise that concern. So it's corruption all the time, and that is not going to be a recipe for success if we don't involve strong civil society that can oversee all these projects.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's end with you, Dr. Eddie Eric, talking on data protection, because resource protection also actually entails protection of data in line with resources. So let's look at how this continental or regional unity can be a force for data protection of information in line with available resources, and how this can help to check or to maybe make a clear trajectory towards attaining the developmental agenda, highlighting industrialization and other aspects that will actually see Africa transforming its natural resources to benefit the continent.
The Mo Ibrahim Foundation a few years ago said that and it's not the only organization to say it, but one of the key problems in planning Africa's development is the question of statistics, the question of research, the question of data, the question of who controls, that information, the question of who is in charge of this body of knowledge. That's number one. Number two, as we talk about data protections in here, I also want to look at the tool that we use for the world today in this world, the global village as we call it, with the widespread of the internet. Even our African governments continue to use Gmail. You have ministers who use Gmail. And once you use a Gmail for professional, or let's say, state affairs or sharing of information, it is easily that it can be exposed to other sources who control that. Many of those countries, therefore, do have an edge when it comes to protecting. Usually when I do travel to some of those African countries, especially my countries of my country of origin, Cote d'Ivoire, you go to a hotel and with this level of protection to and security and safety to track who comes in, who goes to the hotel, who rests in the hotel, and tracking all that, making sure that there is a proper tracking of individuals and all that. I asked them the question, how or who is protecting, who is keeping the data, the bio data that what we give you. Of course, the question will arise, raise some concerns. We will laugh, or we sometimes, you not get any clear answer for them. Where I'm going with this example that I'm citing is the fact that data protection is one of the biggest challenge that challenges that we have on the African continent. It has to be resolved. When you talk about statistics as well and the data, same time as we link that to a critical mineral, we link that to the resources that we are talking about today, Clarisse, is again, who does the exploitation? How many of those African countries have the tool, the necessary resources to map out where the mineral resources, of those countries are? The American Geological, Society, and I think there's another institute in Europe who do that, very well in terms of locating, right, globally, where you have deposit of natural gas, oil, and all crude oil, and all of those things. How many times, how often we have those for the African countries, and how reliable, what those data can be. I believe there is a need to invest in that. Regional bodies, I'm sure, not I'm sure, but do have that, this understanding, but there needs to be an increased amount of investment in this sector. Data is key. Another aspect of the data, very quickly, to show again, how weak and how of a challenge it is the population. When we say that, when Nigeria has the population that we know over 200, a million people living in Nigeria, is it accurate? And we all know that nowhere in the world we can have a fully accurate number of people living in one state. But how close to being accurate is that? How close is that to being accurate is it when we know or we hear about the population in the population of Cameroon or the population of Cote d'Ivoire? Even at those levels, which are very critical for planning development, to know the number of people who live in the country, the number of people who come in or go out, we are also trading or lacking. So again, I submit that as we talk about the protection of our natural resources, data protection is also part of our resources. The protection of the population is a part of our resources, and all of those things should be done in a very integrated manner to make sure, a holistic manner to make sure that we move the needle in the right direction. Clarisse, I want to thank you for the opportunity one more time, and it was a pleasure again to share the stage with Mr. Sharma and Professor EKEU.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erica. We should be extending immense thank you to you all for your great insight in analyzing this very relevant topic for the continent Africa at a time of global transition or transformation. Of course, we are going to end by saying, of course, the challenge goes back not just to African governments, but to each and every African who aligns with the agenda of the continent, with the Ubuntu philosophy that can actually crown every trajectory that will lead to the protection of data, be it in terms of human resources, in terms of mineral resources, and protection of information that will not lead the continent to a state of constant vulnerability, but rather protect the continent and set a foundation for a real new Africa that stands to defend itself both within and without, especially at the international arena. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and it is on this note that we are saying bye to you, and hopefully subsequently we will be together in our next editions to continue to discuss and share ideas on how to make a subtle change for Africa and the world at large. Thank you and bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by Globus.